Hey, everybody. Happy late Thanksgiving. Hope everybody's doing well. Um, it's been a while since I posted. Going through a job change pretty soon here, so I've been busy with that. So, anywho, um, let's talk Wicked. Um, Went and saw the movie. It was great, just like everybody else says. But I do have a bone to pick with the personality typology community because naturally, um, I, when I get into a movie or see a movie or something, I always want to see, okay, what type does everybody think these characters are? Um, and so, of course, Glinda, everybody thinks is an ESFJ, and I can see that. That's fine. Get a little bit of ESFP vibes from her in the movie, but that might just be Ariana Grande kind of showing through. Um, but definitely get ESFJ. But the surprising thing is it just seems like from what I've seen, everybody seems to think that Elphaba, the Wicked Witch, is an INTJ. Um, and that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'll explain why. But before I do, just note there's gonna be a few spoilers, not heavy spoilers about the movie, but just to sort of make the point here and there. I'm gonna have to reference things that happen in the movie. So if you don't want to be spoiled, then watch this later after you've seen the movie. Okay, so Elphaba is an INTJ. Makes no sense to me, but I think it's the classic case of Elphaba is supposed to come across as intelligent, and that's kind of her thing. Is she's intelligent and somewhat reserved and reclusive and introverted, and so I think there's sort of this automatic knee-jerk reaction that if she's intelligent, she must be a thinker type, and even more so an INTJ type. And also, I don't know. I mean, I've only seen the part one. Maybe there's things that happen in part two where she gets into some masterminding and scheming and planning, and maybe that comes across as very INTJ. But um, from what I've seen, and again, the movie's only the first half of the entire musical, but I'm going to assume there's not like some major change in personality. But at least in the first half, to me, it's the classic INFP or introverted feeler Dom against the world kind of movie, right? Your Harry Potter, your Star Wars, um, Hunger Games, where it's either an INFP or an ISFP, lead introverted feeler, that has this sort of ethical core to them, and the entire world is crazy, and it's this big ESTJ machine, and the main person, the main INFP or the ISFP, is the only one that sees it, right? Or is the only one who can do something about it, because they're the ones that have the real true core FI stuff sorted out, right? And they're the ones who see how the big bad machine is, basically treating others unfairly. And of course, in the case with Wicked, it's how the animals were being treated, which was a weird sort of plot device, but okay, I'll go with it. But there was some, big societal machine that is now treating, a certain segment of society or the population poorly, right? And it's the person with the strong FI who's going to come and save the day. Harry Potter, Luke Skywalker, whoever, Katniss from Hunger Games, Frodo from Lord of the Rings. And if it's an INFP, the issue is they just have to get over the hump of you know of being able to take action, right? Frodo needs to get the ring to the volcano and take action. Luke needs to use the Force, take action. If it's an ISFP, it's more about just sort of getting over their own sort of personal humbuggery, I guess, and and sort of seeing, or their own personal pessimism, and seeing that the world actually could change if they do something about it, right? Like, turning on their polar in E, and seeing that there's a possibility that what they do can actually have an effect, and or that there's a possible new world out there, that sort of aligns with their FI values. But so anyways, so going back to Wicked, and so I read these like descriptions of Elphaba as being an INTJ, and they all, and it's funny because the narrative description is all about her, sticking to her FI values. Yes, INTJs have FI. I'll admit that. Get to that in a second. And being a visionary, in other words, being intuitive, and seeing, what's wrong with things and what the possibilities are. And to me, that's just screaming NE, not NI. And and then they'll sort of hand wave the TE stuff about sort of seeing what's really going on and being pragmatic and blah blah blah. But again, yes, she's a smart character. She's supposed to be smart, but you can be an INFP and be smart. And in fact, most of her interactions where you're sort of getting that window into her brilliance or her insight, it's about social stuff. It's about she'll make some sort of pithy comment or observation about social stuff, not not like some hard calculus problem that that she needs to use TI or TE to figure out, or how to like fix a broken machine or something like that. Okay, so rambling here a little bit. So let's go through a little bit more of a sort of structured analysis here, right? So if she's an INTJ, then she would be, FE polar, right? And some people could point to the fact that she's sort of an outcast, and sort of there are scenes where she's a little bit socially awkward or doesn't know what to say, but she doesn't come across as socially awkward to me. The reason she's an outcast is because everybody else is so horrible around her, and she just doesn't want to be like them, right? So it's not that she's oblivious to social norms or social perceptions or any of that FE stuff or interacting with people. In fact, one of the very first things when she gets to the wizard school or whatever that is she engages in with everybody and says, look, I understand, I look different. No, I didn't eat grass when I was young. And no, she has sort of these canned responses to the question about her being green. And she really didn't seem all that upset about it or socially awkward or anything when interacting with him, at least at first, until it sort of became an issue later. So she doesn't come across as FE polar at all. Yes, she's got some FE problems that she needs to deal with, but it's not because she's FE polar and she's oblivious to them, or it's in a blind side or something. It really is just everybody else is just so horrible. And why would she want to be friends with them when they're so horrible to her? Or why would she want to act like them? So I think we can check FE polar off the box or take it off the table. So then the question is, okay, well, if she's INFP, like I'm claiming she is, then is she SE polar? And I guess the thing I would point to is like, they do sort of make her into sort of a Mary Sue type character where she's sort of good at everything she does, right? And so it's sort of hard to pick apart a weakness in her. But if there is a weakness, it's that she can't control her power, right? Sounds a little SE polar to me. She has, a problem. She'll get, the rage built up and can't control sort of her magical energy or power. I guess that could be a metaphor for SE polar. And of course, I don't think that the writers are actually sitting there thinking all this stuff through. But I do think that there's an archetype that resonates when people are coming up with these characters. And the classic INFP is the person who has the power but doesn't know how to use it yet. Your Luke Skywalker, your Elphaba, your Frodo Baggins, all of those INFP hero's journey type characters. Harry Potter, another example. They've got it in them, but they just don't know how to harness it or use it yet. Okay, so I guess you can make it a case for her being SE polar, but she's a little more like industrious than you would typically get with an INFP or SE polar type, where you see her doing her work and being very studious. But again, the writers aren't thinking all that deeply analytically when they're coming up with a character. And so, they want to make her a little perfectly perfect in every way, but having this one major weakness of not being able to control her power. Okay. So, and maybe in the second act, when she gets her power under control, maybe she can become some other sort of type. I don't know. But at least with this one, it's just the classic INFP story. Another thing I would look at. So clearly she's an introverted feeler, right? I even if you go with the INTJ thing, I think it's pretty clear that she's got, FITE type access going on. And then she comes across as more of an extroverted intuitive as opposed to an introverted intuitive. So again, with an INFP, you're going to see extroverted intuition. INTJ, you're going to see more introverted intuition. And why do I say that? Because she's a dreamer, right? So, when we see her, when she's a little kid, when we first see her, she's dreaming about meeting the wizard and how everything's going to be better if she meets the wizard, etc. That very sort of dreamy Luke Skywalker, hey, I want to be a starship, pilot, kind of dreaminess. And then when she gets to the university and then they accept her and she's like, oh, hey, I might have a chance to meet the wizard. She goes into the whole song, The Wizard and I, and just if you're still in the INTJ camp on this, just take a step back and imagine an INTJ singing The Wizard and I. It makes no sense. She's jumping around and, running in the field, and it's very dreamy. It's very future looking. It's very think of all the possibilities kind of, INFP any behavior, as opposed to an INTJ, where it's introverted intuition and it's just sort of, not so dreamy, but just sort of seeing things for what they are, right? Okay. What else? I think as sort of a counter here, if you're looking for an INTJ character, they're not going to be these dreamy, I'm going to change the world type of people, right? They're not going to be, I march to the beat of my own drum and I get this lead FI core personality thing. And if everybody saw the world that I did in the same way that I do, then, it'd all be a better place. And I am using my NE to sort of see that possibility, right? That's the classic INFP sort of narrative, right? Story structure. The INTJ, on the other hand, they they're going to be looking for a problem to solve, a very specific problem to solve, and it's most likely going to be like mechanical or scientific in nature, right? So think of things like the movie The Martian with Matt Damon, where he's stranded on Mars and you spend 2 hours watching him solve a science, basically do a bunch of science experiments. INTJs would eat that up, right? I sort of go back and forth about Sherlock Holmes, but it's kind of the same thing, like trying to figure out, a case or solution to a very specific case, but using very, scientific kind of ways, like CSI, that kind of stuff. Seems like very INTJ type, story structure, where there's a problem to be solved, and somebody's going to use their introverted intuition and extroverted thinking to come up with a solution to this problem, right? Apollo 13, and probably a bunch of sci-fi movies that I don't even know, because frankly I'm not that big into sci-fi, but I'm sure there's a whole series of sci-fi novels or movies or things that are sort of like The Martian. I guess other things could be like, who was the guy? Tom Clancy, and he would get real into the weeds on, how bombs worked or how nuclear submarines worked. I guess, things like Hunt for Red October, maybe. I don't know, where, there's some sort of mechanical problem that needs to be solved, but it's also sort of loosely tied to society, solving a problem for society as well. That's INTJ stuff. INFP stuff and ISFP stuff is the big, like, the world is against us. We're the outsider, but we know that we're right? We've got that FI assuredness, that core FI that's telling us that we're in the right, and it's everybody else who's wrong, and we're gonna somehow figure out how to fix it. And I think that's sort of the irony of Wicked, right? Where the society is it's too strong and too powerful that it makes her look like she's the wrong one, she's the bad one, when in fact she's the only one with any sort of moral compass in the movie. Okay. I don't know. I think I turned on Siri here. I don't know. Okay, so enough about that. I just found it interesting, and I think it's just another one of these examples where when you have somebody, like an Elon Musk or somebody or an Elphaba or somebody who's supposed to be quote unquote smart, there's this natural tendency to make them into an INTJ, either an intuitive or a thinker or both. When if you really stopped and thought about it, are they really an INTJ? I don't know, maybe Elon Musk is, but I've got a whole other video on that. He doesn't give enough. He doesn't talk in analogies enough to make him intuitive in my mind. But that's a whole other story. But there is this tendency, that like, oh, well, if somebody's smart, we better make them a thinker, and sort of ignoring just sort of the overall gestalt and sort of the purpose of the character, right? The purpose of the character is not to do a series of science experiments and wow everybody with their brilliance and figuring out some problem in the mechanical world. It's like pointing out that society is this messed up ESTJ type structure that needs to be dismantled because it's hurting this person's feelings, basically. Okay, I guess that's enough. Good movie overall. The other thing I wanted to point out, and this is completely aside from typology stuff, but it's an interesting phenomenon that I noticed. And I was watching, of course, there's all kinds of videos about the two of them, the two stars, and there's one about Ariana Grande when she found out that she got the part. And if you Google it, I'm sure you'll find it. And it was it was over a Zoom call. And it was being recorded, so you get to see like her immediate reaction. And of course, she gets very emotional and starts crying. And she makes this comment that I thought was real interesting about how I forget exactly what she said, but it was I love her so much, I'm going to take good care of her. And she's talking about Glinda, the character, right? As if Glinda, the character, is this person, this actual person, or this actual thing out in the world. And it wasn't Ariana Grande saying, or reacting in a way of like, oh, I get to be this character, or this says so much about me, or blah, 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 and making it very personal to her. Like the first thing her immediate reaction was to see it as this outside thing, right, that needs to be taken care of. And it reminds me of this concept of the muse, that has been going around. It sort of made waves on the internet a few years ago because there was a TED talk about it. Um, and it's the idea that the creative types, they don't really see their ideas coming from them. Um, if they write a song or a play or a novel, the really good ones, through history, would sort of attribute it to a muse, to an outside thing, and not their own sort of personal abilities or personal skills. Um, and I think she was sort of using that, that sort of philosophy or that way of thinking about craftsmanship or artistry, that it's not about you, it's not about you doing this, it's about this other thing, this muse or this character that's out there, and you being sort of the vessel to take care of it, or to make it happen, or to make it grow. And so I find it really interesting, and I think all of us could apply that sort of philosophy or that framework into really anything that you do. I mean, especially if you're in the artsy, craftsy sort of world of looking at it as not you coming up with the idea or you coming up with the song, but more like you're the vessel to this muse that sort of gave you the inspiration or gave you the material. And I realize that this concept has been sort of Roganized in a way, like it comes up on Joe Rogan a lot. And so you sort of fall into this trap of like, once you start talking about it, now you sound like you're one of these pseudo intellectual types or something. But I think there's something there, and I think there is a lesson that you can learn, because she really did a fantastic job, and you could tell she learned along the way that like that's the right way to be approaching it. Whether she learned it herself or somebody took her aside and told her, I don't know, but however it came to be, it definitely worked. And it was just a cool thing to see. So if you haven't seen the movie, go see it. Sorry I spoiled a few points about it, but other than that, take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.